Basically, all the characters there are trying to do what they can. Batman being useless. Cyclops is getting his DNA changed and just can't do anything. And is trying to fight that. Aquaman is like, what's going on in the sea? If someone's done a sea fart, it's like that. That's what it sounds like to me. It's like, I've got to go investigate that. You know, it is like that. We're going to be talking about a bit of Sergeant Furies and the Howling Commandos. So the first comic we're going to be reviewing is issue 22 of the first volume. This is coming back from 1965. Now I want to give you guys a bit of a brief history behind these comics. So because I've got two of them that we're reviewing in sort of date order, this is how we're going to do it. But to give you guys a bit of a brief history on the actual Howling Commandos and Stan Lee. Now, I'm not sure if you guys were aware with Stan Lee, when he served in the army during the Second World War, he was actually stationed as, or his actual post was, during that time, was a Signal Corps officer, an army base in New Jersey and New York. He sort of went for one and then he got transferred to the other. He joined the army because he thought writing pretended stories about Captain America wasn't getting the job done. So when he was working with Timely Comics at the time, they were producing the Captain America comics to sort of cheer up the public to join the army, to try and fight fascism and all that lot and things like that, because he thought he didn't like what was going on in Europe at the time. So because he thought that wasn't getting done, he decided to join the army. Unfortunately, so he stopped writing stories. So unfortunately, he didn't get the role he wanted to do in the army. This is the thing. He felt a bit disappointed when he joined the army, according to his biography, which I've got behind me, which is this one. But according to his biography and his memoirs, he wanted to be more of a soldier, a bit like what you see in a Captain America film. He wanted to be like that, but instead he got put into the Signal Corps and just ended up just patrolling the bases. That's what he was doing. So they said to him, look, go and patrol the bases around these areas or where we're stationing you, and just keep an eye out for Nazis in case they invade. That's what it was. That's how he was describing it in his memoirs. And whilst he was in there, he sort of got transferred to New York because of his writing fame, because they knew for a fact he was a comic book artist from Timely Comics. So they thought, well, you've done like 6 months or so doing the Signal Corps or whatever. We're moving you on. He was then assigned to do training film, to the training film division in the American Army, and he got to write movies for troops abroad. So not only was he trying to promote things and all that lot, he was trying to sort of get them motivated, train them as they go into the training system as well back home in America. It was after that he got transferred again to write marching songs for the Army Finance Department, which I found was a bit strange, to be honest. So he tried to do it. He thought they were a bit dull at the moment, so he decided to change the marching theme to the Air Force marching song. So he just changed it like that. So he's had a lot of history regarding all this lot, you know. So as he's gone to the army, he's used his experience of Timely Comics to sort of change it to things. So you see this in Marvel films nowadays. So this is what's quite awesome about what you see current Marvel films doing to what he did in his history. So there's quite a bit of that going on, and it's like people might criticize the way the movies were, a bit show business and all that lot, but the main thing is Stan Lee was actually doing all this lot that you see now back in the 1940s. In a way, this is what it was. So as he was doing this sort of thing for this marching band sort of thing for the Army Finance Department, it was around that time he was waiting for a letter from Timely Comics. And it wasn't until the end of the week, like on a Friday, he spotted his letter in the mail room, army mail room in his base, and everyone had disappeared. No one had reception and things like that. And he went, "I'm going to wait 2 more weeks for it to arrive to find out what news is going on with the company he was working for and things like that." So instead of waiting 2 more days for them to sort of open it up on the Monday, he broke into it over the weekend and took his letter. It was around then he got arrested for doing that. So he got brought into the mailroom sergeant's room, apparently. He was given a bit of a rollicking and he was going to get arrested for it. And this is what his main fear was getting arrested. It was that time he was actually made, at the time he was a Signal Corps writer. So he had been moved up from doing things for the Signal Corps army to doing that sort of thing as a writer. So he was from an officer to a writer, which is quite an awesome thing, using his writing skills for that. And they turned around and said to him, look, we need him, he's our best one there. And some of the people he was meeting in there were people who had been doing films and things like that later on, quite famous films and things like that. So in the end, they squashed the arrest record and said to him, look, we need him, he's doing some work for us. And he was made, because of that, as a sort of, we'll quash it, but I want you to do a favour for me, sort of thing, they said to him. So they then he got posted to do some posters for the prophylactic stations around America, because there was a big outbreak of syphilis in the US Army during the war during that time. So he was made to do posters to tell people, keep it in your pants, make sure you don't do anything like that, you affect the US Army by doing this, blah blah blah. He was doing that sort of thing. So a lot of his inspiration from all that time has gone towards these comics, which he started writing in 1963. So when he created these comics, he did it as a bet. He did these comics as a bet to try and make the worst title for a war book ever. It was only supposed to last 7 years. The issues were only supposed to last 7 years. They were only supposed to have gone up to issue 79. But because of demand, and they were quite popular to buy because they were like war comics, war books, sort of depicting what was going on during the war at the time, of getting the youngsters involved and things like that. And of course you had the Vietnam War kicking off and things like that, so people were interested in what was going on during the Second World War, to try and sort of understand the army's way of thinking, in a way, I suppose, that he decided to keep reprinting it until 1981. So this went on from 1963 right through to June 1970. Then you had a bit of a gap until September 1970, and kept reprinting them until December 1981. So they did issues 1 to 79 as original prints. Then they did half prints from issue 80 to 120. That went up to 1974. So in 4 years, they did 40 half prints, and then they did from 121 issues 121 to 167 from 1974 to December 1981. They were all reprints from volume 1. So that's how popular they were. They went from 1963 to 1981. It's quite good to sort of get. So yeah, I ended up reading them and I was quite impressed. So this is first issue I've got, which I've reviewed, and I was quite eager to review it, was issue 22 from September 1965. This is volume 1, and it's basically Don't Turn Your Back on Bull McGee, featuring Operation Tidal Wave, the most daring military attacks of all time, set in August 1943. So this is basically Romania. This is where this is set, in Romania. So it starts off outside the army base mess hall, where Bull and Nick Fury are having a fight, in which Fury sort of kicks Bull's ass. As the general turns up to break it up, they then give them a mission into getting into Romania to sabotage the German flank guns in Operation Tidal Wave. So that's what Operation Tidal Wave was about, breaking the German flank guns in this comic. So as they arrive in B-24s at the oil fields, because they just get dropped down into sort of parachuted down into the airspace, they end up fighting the Germans to take it over. They then move into Polestis, and tensions are running high between McGivey and Fury as they fight a few Panzer tanks, and they are captured and taken to a local command center. So as they're striving to fight between them, they sort of get captured like that. As they arrive, they continue to verbally fight against each other, and then surprise the Germans by turning on them as the bombers start bombing Politziks in a raid. So that's what it was. They had a time limit to get in, destroy the flank guns before the planes could come and bomb the village or bomb the town to get rid of the Germans. That's what the idea was behind it. But they weren't sort of expecting to get captured. So that's what happened when they got captured. So they managed to escape as the bombs are sort of hitting the base and all that. The flank guns are still operational. This is the thing. So they are then having to go up and join up with the rest of the Howling Commandos, and then just go and blow them up. So towards the end, Baron Strucker and his blitzers are then ended up fighting against them, and they end up winning the battle. When they arrive back in England, there's a funny moment where Fury compares Bull to Foghorn and Leghorn from the cartoon series, and he says like, Fury, one of these days I'm going to plaster you all over the map, he sort of says to him. So yeah, this is an awesome comic. Like I said, I'm not sure how true it is to history about the Americans actually in 1943 arriving in Romania. I'm sure that area was part of the Soviet Union at the time, so I think the Soviets would have got there before them. The actual action-packedness of the comic, of them going to try and take out the flank guns before the bombers come in and then destroy the area, it's quite good in this comic. It's really interesting to get that, and for 1965 I can see why that was so popular, this comic. But that is awesome. That is really awesome. This is why I love vintage comics, and just not just the cover of them but the stories. This was actually written by Stan Lee. So this comic was written by Stan Lee, the cover was by Dick Ayers, and so was the interior as well. But it is a Stan Lee written comic, which are getting quite rare these days. But the older the comics you get in Marvel these days are all written basically by either Jack Kirby or Stan Lee. But because there's a lot of history towards Stan Lee being in the army at the time, there's a lot of it with this. Even though he was a Signal Corps officer in the army, he would have come back and heard a lot of stories of what was going on the front. Whether or not they were true or not, I don't know. So he maybe picked up a lot of his influences from that sort of point of view to put into his comics. So next off, I decided to review this one, which is issue 163 from April 1981. Because this is going towards the other side of it. So this was a full reprint. And this is reprint from issue 69. And it's basically called Holocaust in Hell's Kitchen. For those of you Marvel fans, you know where Hell's Kitchen is and things like that. But this is basically set in the war times as well. So this is where the Howling Commandos are set during the war. So on a weekend pass in New York City, at a rundown apartment of Mama Fury's. So they end up going to Mama Fury's, which is Nick Fury's mum. And they end up sort of staying there for a weekend. Reunion with their hard-bitten boss and sergeant, only to discover he'd been brainwashed by the Nazis. And the Nazi spy who's led it was Colonel Klutz, based in his hideout in Hell's Kitchen. So this is where Hell's Kitchen comes into it. Because meanwhile, Dorney Fury, who's Nick Fury's sister, gets kidnapped by Klaus and von Stucker, in which the Howlers have to find her and fight off Herr von Stucker, who is holding her. And it becomes a bit of a chase sort of comic, find and chase sort of thing. You end up fighting against his men and all that a lot right through this comic. And towards the end of the comic, it turns out that Nick Fury was drugged as part of a trap. So he wasn't brainwashed, he was drugged. You don't find that out towards the end of the comic. It took me ages to sort of read through it all and find out, let me read this part. Was he drugged? Was he brainwashed? He was actually drugged. And it was part of a trap by Klaus to trap the Howling Commandos. In the meantime, Nick Fury's younger brother, who helped him, understood why his big brother joined up to the army, because he was very passive towards it. So Nick Fury had a younger brother, and I'm not sure if it's an older sister, Dorney. So this is where you find out a lot more about Nick Fury's family, which Marvel never brought into the films, and you don't see it that often in later comics. But in this one, you get to understand the history of Nick Fury. So his younger brother understands that, and then he promises to enlist the next day into the army because he feels like, well, yeah, we've got to fight the Nazis. They're on our shoreline. And it is a bit of a, what if the Nazis did have a base in Hell's Kitchen or in America, you know, New York or whatever. You sort of realize spies are everywhere, you know. Americans and even the British were worried about that during the war. So you can understand how the Americans felt. So yeah, that was an interesting sort of thing. So we've gone from the front line here, 1943 in Romania, to New York City in Hell Kitchen. So this is what I love about when history cross-references with comics. Yeah, you want what's close to the truth as much as you want, but you also need a bit of action and a bit of, you know, things that's going on. So yeah, That is quite awesome. So that was Nick Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos issue 163 from April 1981. So yeah, the next one we're going to review is The Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vowels. It's volume 2, issue 18, and it's from June 2018. I've been getting quite into the Renew Your Vowels thing because it's all to do with the Spider-Man family. So if people who aren't aware about Renew Your Vowels and the Amazing Spider-Man of that comic series, is that Spider-Man ends up marrying Mary Jane. They end up having a kid or two. I think it is 2 kids. I can't remember. And Peter Parker becomes like a part-time teacher in a way in this sort of comic, but he's still part of the Daily Boog. So that's what happens. Harry Osborn has a child as well, separately. So the whole series is about later on what happens if Spider-Man retires from Spider-Man or is partly retired. You know, this is what this comic series is about, and his family he develops. It's nice Marvel have got into this. I don't think you see it much in the Spider-Verse or any at all, but it's nice that they've gone down this route. You know, it's one of Stan Lee's creations that he did, which is Amazing Spider-Man. They developed it from there to do Renew Your Vowels, and like he originally said, Mary Jane, when he first did Mary Jane in the original comics, it was because she reminded him of when him and Joan first met, his wife. So this comic series, or this comic, The Amazing Spider-Man, is very much at heart with Stan Lee in mind. So they developed it into more of a family affair, I should say. So it's awesome that they've done that. This is Fast Times at Midtown High, Part 3. This volume, this actual comic issue. So basically, school is in session for the Parker household. After a pay cut from the Daily Boog, Peter gets a job as a substitute teacher at his daughter's school. So this is why he becomes a little sort of like a teacher sort of thing. Annie, who is his youngest daughter, I think, has been struggling to find her place outside of nightly costume crusades. So she goes dressing up and does a superpowers sort of thing and things like that. After she discovers 2 students giving themselves chemically induced superpowers in the school theatre, Annie pretended she was affected by their experiment too, and trains the duos to be real heroes. This is what she's doing. She's trying to get these powers a bit more better. So, well, come on, do it for the good sort of thing. You know, this issue is about bringing down the Osborn family, because this is what their intentions are, to bring down the Osborn family, to make them pay for the past crimes. So they're like vigilantes, basically. So both Mary Jane and Peter Parker go out and discover their daughter Annie has joined this group. That is after the Osborns. But Annie joins up with the rest of them at Oscorp's Industry. She catches them mid-fight with Norman Osborn Jr., which is Harry Osborn's son, and tells them that they can't take out their pain on someone else because of their name. So this is what it's all about. It's nice to have that in a comic. And until one of the other members agrees with Annie and persuades the final villain to back down, at the end of the comic, Norman Osborn Jr., that one of his assistants is trying to plot against them. So as much as he's fighting what's going on here, there seems to be inner workings going on regarding the Osborn, or Oscorps, I suppose it should be, and where they want to bring back the Harry Osborn era of villainous in that sort of way. But it turns out it's one of his assistants that's trying to plot against them. So maybe there is a link, maybe there isn't. But as this is only issue 18 out of 20, this must be getting close to the end on where they end up foiling him in that sort of way. But yeah, we won't know until we pick up more issues. But that is quite an awesome sort of read if you're interested in Amazing Spider-Man and the family of Spider-Man. Our next comic we're going to review is Harley Quinn. This is from volume 3, issue 38. This one being issue 38 is from April 2018. The cover of it is Amanda Connor. So you'll notice the cover of that is similar. You'll notice these comic covers are pretty similar because they're done by the same artist, Amanda Connor. So this is why I'm loving both the Harley Quinns and the Captain Marvels. Now, I've been a big reader of Captain Marvel for a long time. With this issue, it's got the first appearance of Egghead and Johnny Karaoke in this, which is awesome sort of names and things like that you see with Harley Quinn and DC villains. Called Angry Bird Part 2 starts off with Mr. Freeze freezing the waters on the beaches of Coney Island. Harley's gang are having a little day out on the beach, relaxing and doing that sort of thing, you know. Harley Quinn, Bolly, and Carly Quinn, which are funny names for little for minions, I suppose you can call them, a part of a gang. They're all in there. There's a bit of a dig at Arnold Schwarzenegger as well when they catch him in a sort of way they sort of confront him. They sort of say, was it Mr. Freeze by the comic name? Mr. Freeze turns on the gang, his freeze gun rays, and they run away. That's what happens. And as they run away, the Contaminated King, dressed as in a Batman outfit, turns up. And yeah, the Contaminated King turns up and squirts everyone. He's all costumed up and all that lot. After that, it cuts to a fight scene. Is it a fight scene? After that, the comic cuts to a scene with Eggfu and Egghead and the Gorilla Gang, in which Harley Quinn turns up and ends up fighting the Gorilla Gang as they hold her up at gunpoint. So there's like a bit of a fight going on. Harley Quinn ends up fighting them and things like that. Then it cuts to a scene in the background with Killer Moth fighting Killer Croc. So it's all these little killer people killing each other, trying to think. It is very sort of what the fuck moment it really is when you read it. Meanwhile, as that's going on, Harley's still fighting the leader of the Gorilla Gang on a rooftop, at the point where she's about to be tossed off the roof when Red Tool turns up and saves her. And of course, at the end of this comic, Harley Quinn is working with the New York City Department, so it's like, yeah, we've captured what you need to know, you know. So she ends up working with the good guys in a way. So this is, like I said, issue 38 of the current series of volume 3 of Harley Quinn. If you haven't got it, go and check it out. That's all I'm going to say for you guys. If you love a sense of humour, go and check it out. So now we're going to move on to Thor, or as I call it, Lady Thor, because it's from volume 4. Now this is a variant strain cover. This is a Pascal Fairy Avenger variant cover, which is quite awesome. I don't think they only ran for 8 issues. This from issue 1 to 8 from 2014 to 2015. Now, for those of you who aren't aware of Jane Foster being Thor and the background behind it, is quite a big background. So I'm going to give you a bit of a background before I give you my review of the comic itself. She became Thor after being diagnosed with breast cancer. She sort of accepted Thor's invitation to represent Midgard in the conquest of the worlds on Asgard while she went under therapy. So she decided to become that because she wanted some sort of help with having cancer and things like that, which is quite moving. She refused magical treatments. However, when Thor lost his ability to use a hammer and she sort of took over, he sought Jane out, who then gained Thor's powers and transformed into a female version of Thor. So this is how it happened. Thor lost his powers. He went looking for her, found out she had cancer, then decided, well, you want to become Thor for me? You know, it'll help you in the long run and we can help you with your cancer sort of thing. She accepted one side but refused the other. And after being Thor, and this is after issue 8, I think it would be in, returned to herself, her chemo was removed from her system and the cancer returned to her system at the same time. But while she had Thor's hammer, she was in perfect health. It's quite a moving story behind the Jane Foster version of Thor, which this is from. It's nice, and the actual title for this was called The Battle for the Hammer. So it starts off with a backflash from Roz Solomon from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. escaping a Roxxon factory with Phil Coulson's car, which is Lola, for people who are interested in that. She sort of escapes on that. We then see her land on the moon where she discovers Thor's hammer, but no Thor. So she's like, where's Thor gone? You know. A week later, Lady Thor, which is Jane Foster, is in the middle of a battle on was it Roxxon Island with the Destroyer. So if you've ever seen the first Thor film, you remember the destroyer from the end of that. That's the same destroyer which she's ended up battling. She loses the hammer, which I'll try and pronounce as Mimar. Is it? I don't know. I think it's roughly how you say it, to the destroyer. So the destroyer ends up getting the hammer for some reason. Meanwhile, back on Asgard, Kull is lying on the floor next to Odin's throne and tells him that he had the hammer in his hands, only agreed to bring back Lady Thor from the battle as for safety. I think he is Thor's other son, I think, or nephew. I think that's who Kull is. But that's the impression I get in this comic. It's like a relation to Odin in that sort of sense. So as that's going on, they're trying to sort of bring back Lady Thor at the same time. Meanwhile, on Earth, Thor is trying to find his son, bumps into his mother at the same time. So we find out in this comic that Thor has a son. At the same time this is all going on, the Dark Elves on Malekith are planning to murder the Light Elves on, was it Alfram? I think that says Alfham. I think that's what they pronounce the actual the sort of world that they're on. At the same time, Lady Thor is still battling the Destroyer, and there's a wonderful moment where she takes the hammer from the Destroyer by magical powers, similar to the end fight. If you've ever seen Endgame, you'll know how Captain America gets the hammer and all that lot. It was in the same manner, a similar manner to how Lady Thor gets the hammer at the same time. It's awesome. And she ends up blowing up the Destroyer with the hammer's powers, with cows looking on at the same time. So by then, she was only Thor for 5 days, and this is issue 7. But this is the impression I got, is this comic goes quite quickly into the process of Jane Foster's cancer and her becoming Lady Thor. So yeah, that's pretty awesome. Like I said, this is a variant cover, strain, volume 4. So if you're interested in the Lady Thor version of Thor, look at that. Next, we go on to Supergirl. So Supergirl itself is volume 7, issue 17. This is called In Plain Sight Part 3. It's the first appearance of Starshame and Evolutionist in this. So if you're aware of what they are, you know what they are. It took me a while to find out who they were. So it starts off with a backflash on Chris Vun, I think that's what it's called. And then they move on to the coast of California, where Supergirl is battling against Starshame until Starshame flies away, leaving Supergirl to deal with a sinking cruise ship. So she's out on the sort of coast of California. There's a cruise ship around, and she's trying to sort of battle this new villain who's Starshame, and they're just trying not to hit things as they're going around. So yeah, she's ended up trying to deal with a sinking cruise ship that's been hit by Starshame. As she's finishing off repairing the ship, Starshame turns up again. As they battle against Agent Jagger turns up to arrest him, but Supergirl just melts the gun and just goes away. Back at the Scabbard, Shy Verities is doing all she can to help Sharon Weiss and Kara. She's remembering the sinkhole. Originally, that's what it is. There's a backflash going back to issue 12, where she remembers causing a sinkhole, and she's sort of understanding why that's happening more than anything. So it then drifts off to like an evening do going on at a public event. So at the end of the comic, they are all at the Solstice semi-formal dance. The Evolutionist turns up demanding Supergirl show herself publicly. When I've been reading it, it's a lot like the TV show version that I've read from what I've seen. So, like I said, I've been watching that, and it's like, okay, I understand the TV version, but it's taken a lot from the comics, which is nice to see. But I think with this comic, it takes a few issues to really understand the process of the storyline. And I think this is where DC go a bit, to be honest. I mean, they've done 30 issues in 3 years, roughly, 2.5 years. And it's like, it's slow. It really is so slow when you're reading it. It's like, skipping events, blah, 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 that happens. Like a tiny thing happens, and it goes to a big long thing. It's a lot like the TV series. It really is. So I'm like, I don't know. It isn't. Personally, I don't think it's a good read. I really don't. And I think this is where DC go wrong. I got it because I like the cover. The cover was pretty nice. But I might get another one just to sort of get the glimpse of it all. That's what I want to look at. It's like I don't want to give up on the Supergirl sort of saga because I've got a few Supergirl comics at the moment here. It's just understanding the whole scenario of how the storyline is developing inside the comic. Next, we've got Black Widow. Now, this was an interesting read, and I really liked it because you got Bucky Barnes in it as the Winter Soldier. This is more my style towards Marvel. It's like Black Widow working with the Winter Soldier, and this is in this actual comic, you start noticing a romantic connection between the two, which is really good. And this is why I currently like the Black Widow comics. I haven't got many. I've got quite a few from there. I've got the original ones when they first produced them in 1999, but this is a more modern one I've got, which I've really got back into, and I thought, wow, I like this. And this is something that could be turned into a future film if they decide that's how they're going to do it. But it is basically teaming up with the Winter Soldier. So in the previous issues of Black Widow, they had to overcome a telepath called the Weeping Lion, who tried to blackmail Black Widow into stealing secrets. But instead of using telepathic powers to discover the Red Room in Russia, at the start of the comic it shows Black Widow traveling to the moon with Bucky Barnes in a space. I think it's with the Quinjet. So they end up going to the moon in a Quinjet to find Nick Fury. Weeping Lion's with them. Unknown to them, they have a stowaway on board. So who comes out and explores the moon once they've come out of the vehicle. So as they're outside, the stowaway comes out. And as they come across the man on the moon, the stowaway comes out and is planning to join up with the Lion and ditch Bucky and Black Widow on the moon with this figure who they think is Nick Fury but are not sure. It could be an evil Nick Fury, no one knows. But as the Lion tries to read what seems to be Nick Fury on Nick Fury's mind on the moon, you see a backflash of Captain America and the other Marvel characters. And at that time his head explodes, so it's like, whoa, the Weeping Lion's head explodes in this comic because he's trying to read Nick Fury's mind. He's going, it's magical, it's beautiful, and it sort of goes wrong for him. But as that's happened, both Bucky and Natasha are just there waiting to see what goes on next. And as they're watching it happen, Nick Fury, or this character who's supposed to be Nick Fury, walks away, leaving a clue on the moon. At the same time, the stowaway in the Quinjet is trying to take off. So Nick Fury walks away. There's a Russian worded clue on the moon's surface that Natasha is trying to understand. And at the same time, she notices the Quinjet going off, and she refers to it as the alien carjacker. Bucky Barnes is starting to run out of air on his suit at the same time to what's going on. As that's happening, he's getting a backflash of the previous mission with Natasha. But Natasha gives him a bit of his last air, the last of her hair, and he goes chasing after the Quinjet who's about to take off. And Natasha's there, running out of oxygen because she's giving it to Bucky Barnes. After retrieving the Quinjet and sort of containing the carjacker at the time, he goes back to get Natasha, gives her CPR. And when she wakes up, they hug and kiss, and they're both joking that there isn't romance on the moon sort of thing, you know. And then they sort of leave with their prisoners strapped to the seats of the Quinjet. Meanwhile, back on Earth, it seems that Anya has become the new headmistress of the Red Room, and is plotting against Black Widow with her new batch of female assassins. So it's almost like it is a play about Natasha's background and the future to what's going on. Nice, there's a romantic connection between the two, and that he isn't as evil as he should be, but they're working together. This is a perfect partnership. This really is. Something I would love to see in a film at sometimes, a partnership between them two. For how many issues did this go on for? 12 issues this went for. So this was like 2016, 2017. This being issue 10 from March 2017. It's a nice read, this really is. And nice that they've teamed up together trying to fight the Russian menace, as they would call it. But that's something I would recommend people. If you've not read a Black Widow comic yet, and you can't get hold of any of the earlier ones, read some of the newer ones, because I feel, from someone who's watched the films quite a lot, that this comic is quite relating to a lot of the films. So if you see them, you'll notice, oh, that's a connection between that film. There's a connection between this film. This is what you tend to find with the Black Widow comics that you read. We've got the Justice League. Now, I'm going to be quite open and honest with this. I've not seen the film, and to be honest, it was quite a lot similar to the Supergirl comic I've just reviewed and read. It's pretty boring, I will say this comic. See, when you get comics, you've got to understand, is it an exciting one you're going to be able to read? Is it a boring one? You know, it's like that. Now, like I said, I haven't seen a Justice League film. Never have, and I've not seen a cartoon series or nothing like that. So this is brand new to me. The characters I liked in it, others are like, really? That's all they do? So it starts off with the Green Lantern Corps having a space battle with some fossilized ship. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Batman and Cyclops are caught in a storm trying to change, the storm is trying to change Cyclops' DNA. It starts off as a purge where the kindred land of the Earth is to destroy it. Aquaman gets spooked by the earthquakes in the sea and comes up to the surface. And Superman is trying to use his powers to contain them. So what was going on, but fails. The Flash is trying to run rings around this monster as it's quaking. So it is about the kindred. So the kindred turn up and causing havoc on Earth. They're causing earthquakes. They're trying to destroy the planet. This is what's happening. And basically all the characters there are trying to do what they can. Batman being useless. Cyclops is getting his DNA changed and just can't do anything. And he's trying to fight that. Aquaman is like, what's going on in the sea? If someone's done a sea fart. It's like that. That's what it sounds like to me. It's like, I've got to go investigate that. You know, it is like that. And Superman trying to use his laser beams and his powers to stop it. But it's failing. And the Flash is doing what a dog does when it's chasing its tail. That's all it's doing. That's all the Flash is doing. But he can't do much with the Quake. And Wonder Woman is just trying to save them all. That's what it's about. And this is why I'm like, really, DC? Is this the sort of comic you want to have Justice League about? Comparing it to the Avengers is like, really? It is still, what the fuck with this comic? But compare it to Harley Quinn and the other comics I've read, it's nothing like that. It isn't. You know, the Yankee Pasky variant cover as well. Brian Hitch wrote it. This is issue 1 to 43. And this is from November 2016, so it's issue 4A. This is volume 3. So yeah, we're left with 2 more comics now. So these are the 2 comics we unboxed last time. So we've got Captain Marvel and Spider-Gwen. So we're going to start off with a bit of Spider-Gwen. So this is volume 1, issue 7. And so after being branded a criminal in the previous episodes that we got, the previous ones we saw, since had publicity revealed her identity, this comic is pretty much inclusive to the Spider-Verse comics. So if you like the Spider-Verse film, you'll love Spider-Gwen and that. You know, Peter Porker and all them lots. You've got the alternative Harry Osborn, who is dating Spider-Gwen. And in this comic, she's actually known as the Spider-Woman as well. So for the rest of us who know about Spider-Woman as being Jessica Drew, this is the alternative universe of it, where it's Spider-Gwen and Gwen Stacy. So like I said, it's all set in New York City. She's become a hero after saving a few bank robberies and things like that. She's foiled a few villains. There's a new villain in it called Manwolf. And she's still having issues with the Mary J band. So now she's become a hero for hire. So this is what this issue is. She's become a hero for hire. So it starts off with Gwen Stacy going on a date with Harry Osborn, and they're comparing, they're fighting criminals a lot more as they're going on dates. With her also mentioning that superheroes don't wear heels as well, so they're having a fight as they're going on the dates. She walks in, she's wearing her normal clothes, and Harry's going, "Why are you not dressed up a bit more?" To her, she says, "Well, superheroes don't wear heels, you know." So as they order their food in a fancy restaurant, she gets a lot of dirty looks as she's sort of sat at the table, and she asks for some corn dogs, which is her favourite food in this, for a dinner. At this point, they're asked to leave by the waiter, and Gwen thinks it's to do with her. So as she's running out upset, it seems the restaurant doesn't like her being neither a hero or a criminal, because she was originally Gwenom in this. So for you guys who aren't aware who Gwenom is, it's a female version of Venom. So she absorbed it in one of the last issues, or one of the last volumes towards the end. She absorbed some of the nanonites, or the nanonites that Venom has, and she turned it into a Gwenom sort of state. So she was going around creating crime. And it wasn't until Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. found her that they managed to change the DNA to get her to come back to her normal self. So that's what happened. And then she got transported over to the Spider-Verse. She went to prison for her crimes, and she came out, and then Peter Parker started transferring her around the different Spider-Verses at the beginning of this comic. So the first 3 or 4 issues from issue 1 to 4 or 1 to 3 are to do with her traveling around with Peter Parker and exploring the aftermath of the Spider-Verse. So that's what it's about from the film, in a way. So there is a big link between that and Gideon Spider-Man at the same time. So if you're interested in them comics, this is an off sketch of what went on with that with Spider-Gwen. So as she leaves the restaurant in this, she goes on a sort of patrol as Spider-Gwen to get the data out of her system, and she goes around kicking criminals' asses, and as she's doing that, she realizes she has a message regarding a science gig. So she's been hiring herself out as a sort of, I wouldn't call it a Reddit thing, but you know, like a Craigslist thing. Come and like superhero for hire. Would you like Spider-Gwen to do things for you? Like that. That's what it is. To be honest, that's how she's advertising herself as on this comic series. It's like, really? So as she goes to see it, the guy, sort of the scientist, she's knocking on the door. She's not dressed up, and they mistake her for a cosplayer. This is what it is. She's mistaken him as a cosplayer, who sets up as a hero for hire for the community. So as she's going through to these different tasks she's having to do every day, it sort of shows you in the comic the tasks she's having to do each day. By the Friday, she's on another date with Harry Osborn. While she's on the date, she gets a message about an incident. So she leaves the date, goes off as Spider-Gwen to the incident, and she ends up saving a kid from a car crash and a man from under a car. And as she's finishing off saving everyone from this multi-crash that's going on, an explosion happens, but everyone is saved. So it is quite a interesting thing going on with that. At the end of the comic, she returns home with another headache, because she's been having headaches through the comic, because I think it's to do with the side effects of when she was Gwenom, in that sort of respect. But she isn't sure what's going on, and wonders if she can help out the science nerd she met. So during the week, she met this sort of science nerd who wanted a project making, and she said, "I can't do that because I don't have the expertise." So she ends up calling Harry to meet Dr. Elsa Brock, and that's where the comic ends. So if you liked Into the Spider-Verse, you'll love the Spider-Gwen comics. There's a lot like that. Now we go on to Captain Marvel. Now this has been really interesting to read. This is this is issue 4, volume 11. From what I understand, some people call it volume 10, but it's actually volume 11 from what I know from the databases I've seen. But this is basically Rogue versus Captain Marvel, re-entry part 4. This is, and this is done by the same comic book artist who does Harley Quinn comics, as we mentioned before. So when a villain called Nuclear Man shows up to New York, so this is what's happened previously. So this is a bit of a story for you guys who haven't been watching the show. As we've been getting this comic, this is the 4th one we've reviewed. So in this issue, or on this volume, they've got a villain called Nuclear Man who shows up in New York and kidnaps a young reporter called Ripley Ryan. Carol Danvers, who is Captain Marvel, She goes off after them, only to be trapped inside a barrier around Roosevelt Island in New York. Then Carol finds that the island has been transformed into a post-apocalyptic wasteland and defended by Spider-Woman, Hazmat, Echo, and the powerless She-Hulk. So all them characters are in there. So when I talk about Spider-Woman, I'm talking about Jessica Drew's in there, the English woman who's Spider-Woman. Hazmat is a young girl. Echo, I've forgotten who Echo is, but She-Hulk, everyone knows who She-Hulk is. Intending to build an empire of male dominance, Nuclear Man has trapped hundreds of men in his citadel. Only one has managed to escape, Som, who is his own son, who claims to be on the rebel side. Now, keeping Som close, Captain Marvel and Spider-Gwen enter. Sorry, it's not Spider-Gwen, Spider-Woman enters the citadel. I'd love it to be Spider-Gwen, to be honest. I really would. It'd be like a nice crossover between the two comics. But it's a different one. So yeah, Captain Marvel and Spider-Woman enter the Citadel, where they discover the next stage of Nuclear Man's plan, which forced them to fight against Metal Men, sending Jess, who's from the third Thor film, and Som back to warn the others. Carol stayed to buy them more time, but quickly realised Nuclear Man had a special guest waiting for her. So the comic kicks off with a little backflash of when Carol last met Rogue, where Carol got thrown off the bridge by Rogue. It also starts off with a heavy fight scene between Carol and Rogue in the Citadel itself. As they are fighting, Nuclear Man shows up and electrocutes Rogue, knocking her unconscious. Captain Marvel and Nuclear Man end up talking for a bit until Carol passes out. For some, I don't know why. Meanwhile, back in Rebel Base, Jess makes it back and they call a meeting about how to defeat Nuclear Man and Rogue if need be. After that, the comic cuts to the Nuclear Man arena, which is similar to what the arena you see at Hulk battle Thor in Ragnarok, where Rogue and Captain Marvel battle it out. So there's a big link between that two. It's like, wow, really? You know. You have them Rogue pleading to Carol during combat to kill her, with tears in her eyes after being mind controlled by Nuclear Man. So this is how Nuclear Man has been controlling Rogue. Carol knows about this, so Captain Marvel knows about this control that's going on. So tries to talk her out of his mind control until she loses the battle, and the rebels start to plan their attack at the Citadel. So as they finish the battle, Nuclear Man watches over Carol. So Carol or Captain Marvel lost to Rogue deliberately and lying on the ground. The rebels start their attack. Rogue then pulls off the mind control collar that she's got on. So this is how she's being controlled, is by a collar that she's wearing. And it turns out that Carol, or Captain Marvel, has transferred herself into Rogue's body. When Rogue absorbs people, sort of powers, they transfer them into her. So this is how it's happened. So she transferred Captain Marvel into her body, and Captain Marvel, as in Rogue's body, has actually pulled it off. And he starts to fight against Nuclear Man as Rogue, but with Captain Marvel's power. So she's absorbed Captain Marvel's power, so she can fly, she can do her zappy zap stuff that she can do. But as she confronts him about the barrier, there's one thing she's forgotten, and that is about his bomb. Where is his bomb? Have they walked into his trap? We won't know until we open up the next issue. So that is an amazing story from Captain Marvel. I really do enjoy that. It's properly based from the films and the previous comics. But yeah, you've got to sort of understand, when Kelly Thompson wrote this, she had that in mind. It is awesome. So this is what I love about this. So that is issue 4 of volume 11 of Captain Marvel. So that is what I'm looking forward to doing more than anything. So that is that. The comic kicks off with a little backflash of when Carol last met Rogue on San Francisco. I get it right now. San Francisco. It's a tongue twister. I've been speaking for so long I can't say it. San Francisco Bridge. That's it. That's a bit more better.